Lejla, please tell my story. I met my boyfriend when I was 18. It was on a night out when he swooped in to save me from being harassed by another man. I'd been sexually assaulted earlier that year and was still really nervous about being out, so when he did that, it really felt like he was my knight in shining armour, and we became inseparable from the very beginning. I hadn't been in a relationship before him, so I just went along with it. We did everything together. He would sometimes comment on my clothes and my makeup in front of my friends, which made them uncomfortable, but I just felt angry with them for questioning his preferences. And it wasn't long before I fell pregnant. I do remember questioning myself about the type of parent he would make. I don't know why, but something just didn't sit right, and the abuse started to take shape. He would take my credit cards and max them out, hide my car keys, lock me out on the balcony, starting arguments with me on purpose before I left for work, which made me late almost every day. I then found out he wasn't working at all. The night before my first midwife's appointment, he said he thought I should go with my mum instead of him and that he would not be the one to attend. In the morning, as I was getting ready, I used the torch on my phone to pick up some clothes so I could get changed in the bathroom. He stormed out of bed, knocked the phone out of my hand, and screamed at me for waking him up. He grabbed me by my neck and held me up against the wall, and my feet were barely touching the floor. He said that if I didn't get an abortion, he'd be the one to get rid of the baby for me. I was so shocked I didn't even retaliate. I just covered up the marks on my neck and headed off to my appointment. As part of a routine checkup, the midwife asked if my partner had ever been physical with me, and that was the first of many cover-ups. When I tried to talk to him about what happened that morning, he just denied everything, and the relationship continued. His drug use and spending habits got worse. I eventually ended up losing multiple jobs because of him, and I did try to leave, but I always ended up going back. I physically felt like I couldn't live without him. I believed he could change, but his behaviour remained erratic as he had a looming court case against him. I tried to support him as best as I could, but it felt like nothing I did was good enough. I had no idea what I was doing for him not to love me the way that I loved him. All the things he'd said and promised, it was just lies. I was carrying his child, but somehow I still wasn't enough. And things did get easier throughout my pregnancy as he was serving his prison sentence. We had no contact, and I began planning my life as a single parent. After a while, he made contact with me saying that he wanted to see our child. I was excited and happy for my son, and I was feeling a little bit lost having just moved out on my own and raising a baby. I thought, what's the worst that could happen? We seemed to get along quite well. He told me how prison had changed him and that he was adamant he was never going to go back. He just wanted to be a dad now and have a good relationship with me. And it wasn't long before we did get back together. My friends and family hated it. He would tell me that if they couldn't accept him, that they could no longer see our son. And somehow, he managed to make me think that that was okay. So me and my family began to fall out. And within 3 months of him moving back in with me, we had 5 domestic call-outs from the police. I had an emergency marker on my address, and social services had placed my son on a child protection plan. He always blamed me for it. He said that our neighbours only called the police because of the way that I reacted to his violence, and that if I was a good mum, they would have seen at the first visit and left. He didn't attend a single appointment with social services. I did everything on my own. He even manipulated me into lying to them and telling them that we were no longer together. It was exhausting having to keep up with everything. I was seeing a domestic violence coach, all whilst experiencing abuse at home anyway. I was able to hide this from my family for a few months, until one day, my mum showed up to witness it firsthand. Whilst I was making dinner for my son, he tried to force the knife that was in my hand into his own stomach and blamed me for the injury. I even watched him slit his own throat and punch himself in the face, telling me that he's not stupid enough to do it to me, so do it to himself instead, because I wasn't worth going to prison for. I was told what I could and couldn't wear, where I could and couldn't go, who I could and couldn't see, where I could and couldn't work. I would have my phone on loudspeaker all day so that he could listen to whatever was going on around me whilst I was at work. He was suspicious that I was sleeping with my colleagues. Being at home was hell. I would make his lunch for work every single day, and he would often end up throwing it at me in his rage. I'd always make sure to put my son to bed early so that he couldn't hear the argument or feel the bad atmosphere between us when he got home from work. On his days off, I'd just sit in my son's room alone all day so that I didn't have to be around him. Often, he would put on unethical porn and make me have sex with him to it. One morning, I woke up to him forcing me to be intimate with him. When I tried to pull away, he just forced me back down until I was sick all over him. Then he continued to force himself on me, all whilst the tears were running down my face. And I just laid there, knowing that this was all happening and my son was sleeping in the room next door. I just didn't want to accept that this was my reality. I even said yes to him when he proposed whilst he was drunk. I don't know why. I hated him and I never wanted to get married. After he proposed, he told me to put some makeup on and get dressed so that we could take a picture and post our engagement news on social media. And my mum started to ask questions. She knew that something wasn't right. She mentioned a particular time where she'd seen the amount of fear I had in my eyes one day during a family barbecue. She hadn't been able to forget the look on my face, and I knew exactly what she was talking about. The mental abuse, the silent treatment, the knocks, the pushes, the shoves. I knew exactly what was coming after I'd done something wrong, and I knew how it would end every time. He eventually started smoking drugs in our home too. When I asked him to leave, he just laughed in my face, saying that I couldn't tell him what to do and that he was the one in control. I stood in the kitchen that day, and when he came in, his face had just changed. I immediately felt sick. I told him I no longer wanted to live like this, so he lunged forward at me and smashed my head into the wall. I felt dizzy and lost my balance. When I looked up at him, he was coming closer to me. His voice was calm but evil. He told me how pathetic I looked and continued to smash things up in the kitchen. I ran to the bedroom and he came up behind me and threw me into the drawers. He pinned me down to the floor, screaming in my face. I was unable to move my arms or legs. He had the whole weight of his body pushing me into the broken drawers. He'd followed me back into the living room now, grabbed the bread knife from the kitchen, and he slashed his own hand. He started screaming, "Look what you've done to me." He was screaming at the top of his lungs. Then he picked me up over his shoulders and launched me over the sofa where I landed onto the mirror. My back took the fall and broke the mirror into pieces. I rolled over on my side in pain, but he didn't stop there. He then lunged over and bit down as hard as he could onto my arm. All I could feel was this burning but numbness at the same time. My response was to grab his hair and pull his head off me, which only made the bite worse, but eventually he did let go. I quickly sat up and I shuffled out the way. He just stood there laughing at me, saying, "Nice try, but you're going to have to try harder." I needed to get out of the flat. He was pacing the living room back and forth, laughing, and I could hear him. He was talking to himself, calling me a slag and saying that I'm a nasty piece of work and he doesn't know how he puts up with me. I had enough time at this point to pack a bag. I got my son into the buggy and I went to try and hide in the bedroom. I told him that I was going to go out and get some fresh air and that I just wanted to bring some stuff with me for my son. He just came closer and closer and again smashed my head into the wall. I was begging him to stop. He locked the front door and grabbed my phone out of my hands whilst I tried to call the police. I just stood there, unsure of what to do, not knowing what he was thinking of. How was I going to get out? But I didn't have enough time to think of an escape plan. He charged at me, rugby tackling me to the floor, which knocked the buggy over, and he pinned me back down again by my neck. I saw my son lying on his side in the buggy, screaming and crying. And although I could barely get this man off me, I somehow found the strength to. Despite the headbangs that I had received, the pain that I was in, the arm that he had bitten, and not being able to see through my tears, I managed to push him out of the bedroom. I screamed at the top of my lungs and told him that if he didn't get out of the house, I was going to kill him, and I meant it. The front door was only a couple of feet away from him, and I pushed and pushed and pushed until I got him to the door. We were struggling with each other. He started telling me to calm down and that he loved me, and all we needed to do was talk about it. And then we both heard the sirens, and he was gone. He just ran out of the flat. And when I turned to look around, there was blood everywhere, including all over my son, my face, all over the walls, the floor. There were dents from where my head had been smashed into the wall. The drawers were even more broken than they were to start with. I picked my son up and tried to clean the blood away from him, and the police finally arrived, and so did my mum. She cleaned the blood off me and the flat, whilst the police took my statement. It still breaks my heart knowing what my son witnessed that day. I'll never be able to forgive it. I was examined in the hospital for injuries, but thankfully I was okay. I had some concussion that lasted a few days, and the bruising went away after a few months. I do occasionally get a numb and tingly feeling in my arm where he bit me. I immediately got a non-molestation order, and I haven't heard a word from him since that day. He was on the run for 3 weeks before the police caught up with him and arrested him. I continued through with social services all on my own, and it took them about 6 months to realise that I was a boss mum. I just needed to break free from a bad relationship. I attended the Freedom Programme, where I met amazing women who had experienced just what I had, and my life started to make so much sense after that. I got a job that he told me I was never capable of doing, and I started getting qualifications for the things that I liked. I'm being the best mum to my son because he deserves nothing but a happy life. If my story can help just one person, then I'll sleep better at night. I really wish that I had someone to tell 18-year-old me that there is nothing exciting about dating a bad boy. So please, ladies, don't ignore red flags. Please get help and get out. Please don't keep your abuse a secret like I did.